On June 2nd, 2023, Canadians were shocked to learn that one of the most dangerous and notorious serial killers ever known in our country had been transferred from a maximum security prison near Kingston to a cushier medium security prison. To this day, the name of Paul Bernardo haunts Canadians. This serial murderer and rapist committed unspeakable crimes. Between 1987 and 1992, Bernardo sexually assaulted many women and killed 3. He was handed a life sentence for kidnapping, torture, and murder. When Paul Bernardo was on trial, the judge stated that Bernardo's crimes were of such a brutal nature as to compel the conclusion that his behavior in the future is unlikely to be inhibited by normal standards of behavioral restraint. Paul Bernardo was then diagnosed as a sexually sadistic psychopath who was and is unlikely to change. Because of this, his transfer to a medium security penitentiary remains beyond comprehension. When the transfer became public, it was also revealed that Justin Trudeau's and Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino's offices had known about the transfer for months. In contrast, the families of murder victims Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey learned about the transfer the day it happened, on May 29th. The lack of consideration and empathy for the families of the victims is evident. Understandably, many of their wounds were reopened. Tennille Chwalzak, a friend of Kristen French, said Bernardo's transfer filled her with absolute fear and anguish and tears and rage. Canadians are still horrified by Bernardo's case, a case that made people across the country feel unsafe and scared. Many wrote letters to the government asking that Bernardo be transferred back to maximum security, but today he remains at a medium security prison. At the time of this transfer, I worked with Conservative colleagues on the Public Safety Committee to demand that Parliament hold hearings into this transfer. The victims' families and representatives were not heard during the transfer, but we wanted to give them their day in Parliament. At the time, we used all of the procedural tools available to insist that they be heard. I know a thing or two about parliamentary committee procedure, and yes, we used every tool in the book. We didn't back down. After a few committee meetings, the other parties gave in and agreed to our demand that the hearing be held on this prison transfer. Whenever a parliamentary committee does a study on something, it files a report with the House of Commons, highlighting key points that were identified in the study and often making recommendations for the future. That is the job of parliamentary committees, to report on their findings to Parliament as a whole. The hearings on the Bernardo transfer took place in the fall, and then the committee discussed the preparation of a report on December 6th of last year. That's almost 6 months ago. After that, the hard-working committee staff prepared a draft report. Normally, the immediate next step would be for the committee to review that report, to agree to a final text, and to file that report with the House of Commons. But the other parties have blocked our efforts to complete that report. They didn't seem to want this study in the first place, and now they don't seem to want to publish the report. And so the committee has been sitting on this issue for almost 6 months. Well, enough is enough. Because of Conservative insistence, the victims were heard, and now Conservatives will insist that this report be presented to the House of Commons. So I've been back at the Public Safety Committee, working with my Conservative colleagues to once again insist that victims be heard. Please join us in sending a message to Liberal and NDP MPs. It's time to release the report. Stop burying it, come clean with Canadians, and allow the words and recommendations of the families of the victims to be heard in the House of Commons.